Okay, everybody. So since the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer was released, we all know that Mysterio is in the movie, and there's a kind of a all of a sudden a new hype for the character. I've always loved the character. I thought he's always been one of my top Spider-Man villains. Him and Craven have always been very high on the list of my favorite Spider-Man villains and ones I would love to see on film. I would love to see Craven, man, even if it's in Punisher. I would love to see him. Because I've always thought he would be a cool Punisher villain, but that's beside the point. This is going to be a retro review for Amazing Spider-Man number 13. What's the original first appearance of Mysterio, art by Steve Ditko, the amazing late Steve Ditko, and story by the amazing late Stan Lee. Almost brain farted on his name, but I've always really had a appreciation for the original Spider-Man run. Like the first, I guess, couple years or whatever. Steve Ditko was doing the art, and Stan was doing the writing, because it was just really good storytelling and really good art and really creative fight scenes, and it was just it was just great, guys. And it was still in the early times of modern superhero comics. These were still pioneer days when they were still figuring things out. And so you really see a lot of the influence that the early Spider-Man stories have on modern comic book storytelling cliches and frameworks and stuff like that. But as Spider-Man starts to really kind of unwind and talk to the guy, he realizes that he can't do this. Like, if he accidentally gets too comfortable and slips out some important information about who he is, then it could backfire on him. This really isn't a good idea. So he jumps out the window, and the psychologist is like, "Come on!" It was actually kind of funny to read. So this issue pretty much deals with the idea that there's a guy, Spider-Man's robbing banks at the beginning of the issue, and stealing money from people, and lots of eyewitnesses see him do it. So there's all this gossip spreading around on the news and the media and stuff that Spider-Man's a criminal. Everybody's starting to have different opinions about Spider-Man. Some people are like, he can't be doing it. Some people are like, yeah, of course he is. Of course Peter, he knows he's not doing these crimes, but he can't help but think that maybe he's losing his mind. Maybe he's got a split personality, because he knows that he's the only person with the powers of Spider-Man. So how could someone else be doing this? And you got to remember, this is early Marvel. This is before there was a whole lot of superpowered people around, and it was more of the idea that somebody could wall crawl and shoot webbing was kind of crazy. Nowadays there's in the Marvel universe there's 20 characters that have that power set, or more. But Spider-Man's he automatically assumes that he must be losing his mind, that he's got a split personality, that he's sleepwalking and doing these things, which are all kind of ridiculous. And I feel like Peter shouldn't. That was just a really crazy jump of disbelief for Peter to have. But at the same time, I can kind of understand it, because Peter would be he's somebody that's in a whole different ballpark than everybody else. Like, he's been bit by a radioactive spider, and he's still alive, and he has powers. So who's to say what would happen to his mental state? He doesn't know. He's totally in uncharted territory. So he tries to go to a psychologist, as Spider-Man, and try to get him figure out what's going on. The psychologist is super happy to have him, because the psychologist is like, well, if I can be the one that figures out, the mystery behind Spider-Man, figuring if I can prove that Spider-Man's a mental case or whatever, I cure him, I'll be the greatest, psychologist ever. That's how he's thinking. Meanwhile, the Daily Bugle, Jameson has gotten an anonymous letter that's, from some guy called Mysterio, that claims he can defeat Spider-Man and bring him to justice. So, Jameson's I guess responded with, well, let me see how real this is. Prove yourself. So Mysterio pops up at the Daily Bugle, and basically just declares that he is a all powerful person, that he will defeat Spider-Man, and that he'll bring justice to the city. But then, of course, they'll have to pay him for it or whatever, which I thought was kind of weird that he would go to the Daily Bugle instead of say the police office or City Hall or something. But it also makes sense, because he's trying to promote himself and get himself out there. And we all know this we all know what Mysterio's thing is. We all know that he's all about illusion, misdirection. So we all know that he's framing Spider-Man. But as a reader in the original comic book, you gotta put yourself in the mind frame that you don't know who this guy is. He pops up, and we don't actually see him as pretending to be Spider-Man, so we assume that he's a different character, and we're like, okay, whatever. And you gotta love the classic Mysterio costume design, it's so great. Like I love the way you can kind of see the shadow of his face, but you can't really make out any details. It's all covered in that fishbowl helmet. I love the eyes, like as the as the cape thing that connects the cape to his chest piece. They look really cool and kind of mysterious. So Mysterio basically sets up a meeting with Spider-Man on the Brooklyn Bridge, of course, because that bridge is always the place of battles. And Mysterio tries to defeat Spider-Man. They have a big fight. It's actually pretty cool the way they do it. Mysterio is like outmaneuvering him at every corner. He tries to shoot his webbing, but Mysterio is able to make the webbing disappear. Kind of mimicking the idea that he's got some kind of powers. But we all know it's just things, tricks, and stuff that he uses. But Spider-Man gets knocked off the bridge, and basically the police are coming after him, and he has to like pretend to be drowning. So he creates like a webbing bag for air that he can use to breathe on the water for a little bit longer, which is kind of cool. Don't know all the physics of how that works, but it was pretty cool. He used to do a lot of cool stuff like that in the early issues, like uses webbing for really weird kind of constructs and to make objects and stuff. He used to do that a lot. Like he makes a parachute at the beginning of the issue with his webbing, stuff that you don't really see him do as much in modern comics. Well, Spidey and Mysterio end up having a rematch at a movie studio because that's where Mysterio works, since he's actually like a special effects guy, and Spider-Man basically tracks him down using like a giant ass tracker that he was able to plant on him in the earlier scene, which is ridiculous. If you would have saw that tracker, it makes no sense of how Mysterio didn't know that was on his body. Anyway, but so they have this really cool fight inside of a movie studio. They get knocked around to different like set pieces, and they're using different props to fight on and stuff. It's actually pretty cool. It's a really creative fight scene. And while during this fight scene, Mysterio has the upper hand on Spider-Man, and he starts doing what every villain does, and it's really annoying. He starts monologuing for like 20 minutes about like why he's doing this, how he's doing this. He even gives a detailed expedition for every trick that he does in the issue. He details how he was able to disintegrate Spider-Man's webbing, how he was able to imitate Spider-Man and walk on walls and shoot webbing of his own. He goes through all of that, and it's pretty interesting. A lot of it doesn't make sense. A lot of it's like really stupid science, in 1960s. Let's just imagine. Kids are dumb. They'll understand it. It's a lot of really bad ways to explain how he does everything. But at the end of the day, it is a comic book. It is fiction. You just gotta go with it. But Spider-Man has a recorder. He's recording everything that Mysterio is saying. Classic, superhero move that actually I don't think it even works in real life, because I'm pretty sure isn't recorded in video evidence. Doesn't that not work in courts of law? I don't know. I think I read that somewhere. Spider-Man eventually powers through the giant smoke screen by just literally swinging his fists in the smoke screen until he hits Mysterio, which is kind of funny. It actually works, but it's kind of hilarious when you think about it. And overall, the issue is kind of it's very clunky kind of dialogue and story exposition, which is common in these older Silver Age stories. The writing is never really all that strong. Like there'll be aspects of writing that are really strong, but I feel like the dialogue is usually where it gets really shitty. Like the way people talk to each other in the story, and there's always a lot of exposition. Even though it's a comic book, it should be visually telling you the story, but there's always a ton of exposition in these old issues. And this book definitely falls prey to those problems. Overall, it's still a really good story. It's still a classic kind of story. It's a classic villain, and the art is awesome. It's it's when you take all the kind of unbelievable kind of situational stuff that really doesn't feel like it'd be the logical way the characters would behave. When you take all that out of the issue, you are left with a pretty entertaining story. About being framed and trying to prove your innocence, and also trying to prove to yourself, your sanity, if you're actually crazy or not. Like I did like those aspects of the issue, with Peter legitimately thinking that he's going crazy, even though it was extremely illogical for him to think that way, and how fast he comes to that conclusion. I did feel like it was a really interesting dynamic for the issue. And Mysterio's costume design, his weapon design, everything about him is awesome in this issue. So let me know in the comments, guys, what do you like about Mysterio? Is he one of your favorites? Is he one of your least favorites? Let me know, and see you guys later. Also, let me know if you guys are excited for the Far From Home movie.